morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Drop in the Gloves. Thanks for joining me here. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody had a good 4th of July. I am John Scott, as you know, and we're round 2 of post-Tim era. I don't know how long I will do the post-Tim countdown, but this is episode 2. I'm sorry it took a little bit longer to get out. We had the 4th of July. My work computer got completely fried, so I had to get a new motherboard, and that meant re-downloading stuff, and it's just been a complete disaster. But now here, we're Wednesday morning, a little bit late. I apologize. Hopefully I'll get this out by Wednesday afternoon, and all will be right in the world. And we got an interview lined up in the next couple days. Connor Clifton, traded from the Buffalo Sabres. Gosh, I don't even know where he got traded to. I should probably look into that. But great guy, met him in Buffalo when I was there earlier this season, so he's nice enough to come on the first interview of the post-Tim era, which would be great. But yeah, happy 4th of July, belated 4th of July to everybody. I hope everybody had a good weekend. I myself did. I went out and bought a bunch of fireworks, and I got very, very close to being Jason Pierre-Paul'd a couple times. I was lighting off the big mortars. I've never done that before. And I got in my head where I want to be like a professional and have everything go off at once, where it's just thunk, 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 and all the fireworks light off at once, because it's kind of boring when you just do one, fires up, then you have to run over, do another one. And so I was getting a little too ambitious, and I had 2 mortar shells and a couple other ones, and I was trying to light off 5 or 6 of them in a row. And as I'm lighting off the 5th and the 6th, the first couple mortar shells are going off, and my hand's reaching, and it was just like sketchy as get out. But I managed to make it through. No fingers or toes or appendages lost. It was a lot of fun. Everybody enjoyed it. So bigger and better things next year. I've already looked into, getting a computer program to automatically light off the fireworks, and you have a long wick, and everything kind of is a little more safer and a little more organized. But, live and learn. Speaking of living and learning, I had a funny thing with my kid Lillian last week. We're unpacking all my junk still because we're moving into the new house, and she grabs these binoculars. I didn't even know they existed, and she is just going around the house, going around the yard, and I look at her. I'm like, "What are you doing, kiddo? What are you looking at?" And she goes, "I'm just looking at the sun with the binoculars." And as a parent, you have high hopes for your kids, and you want them to exceed and excel. And I just looked at her and I said, "You're." First of all, I yelled at her to stop. And then I gave her the question. I said, what good is coming from this? I ask that to my kids a lot. I'm like, what good comes from this? Whether it's like hitting your sister, or, hiding something, or shoving a pair of poopy underwear under the dresser or something like that. It's like, what good comes from this? What's the end game here of you staring into the sun? And she goes, "Oh, I don't know." And mind you, she's only 7. So maybe she doesn't get it, but I told her, don't stare at the sun. It's dangerous. It hurts your eyes. And here she is, just staring at it with binoculars. I'm just like, how on earth are you fruits of my loin? It just is bizarre when kids do these silly things. But then I look back, like, here I am lighting fireworks with my hand over a mortar, just because I want it to be in succession and have like a little more cohesion with my fireworks. I'm like, well, maybe the apple didn't fall too far from the tree, but it's just like, I don't know, for parents, drop a comment. Like, let me know. Is this normal to look at your kids and go, what's wrong with you? What happened? Why are you doing this? It's so bizarre. But speaking of fireworks and speaking of bizarre moves, I wanted to dig into the Carolina Hurricanes today. I just want to first say I appreciate all the feedback I got from my first episode, because I got a lot of emails, and a lot of good constructive criticism, and I really appreciate that. And keep doing that. Keep firing me emails. It's John at droppingthegloves.com. There's all kinds of ones. Go to my website and send me some feedback. Check out my Twitter or my Instagram and send me feedback. Drop it in my YouTube comments. I read all of them. I try to respond to all of them. Like I said, my computer went down this weekend and early this week, so I haven't been able to get to all of those. But yes, please give me feedback. A lot of people said they enjoyed the first episode. Some people said, "Oh, you should probably look into getting a co-host." I will, but again, it all comes down to dollar and cents, and I need to start making some do-re-mi on this in order for me to keep some hosts long term. Tim and I are making good money, but Tim's getting married now. How about he sent me a card this week, and I thought it was an engagement notice, but it wasn't. It was just he was sending me some stickers. And I was like, Tim, got my hopes up that you're getting engaged. But anyways, yes, thank you for all the feedback. I really, really appreciate it. I will try to take everything into account, but a lot of people said they like the deep dives. And I enjoy that too. So today we're going to do a deep dive in the Carolina Hurricanes. And if you're a part of my Slack channel, which all of you should be, it's a lot of fun. Just join my Patreon. I think it's $5 a month, especially with Tim gone. I could really use it. But yeah, join Patreon. We have a great conversation. And we get a lot of Carolina Hurricanes fans in there, and they're very passionate. And I always go back and forth with them because I was always under the impression that Carolina was and is a small market team who trades away their high end players, who doesn't sign a lot of players in free agency, and who flame out in the playoffs just because they can't compete because they don't have superstars. And I always thought this was a self inflicted wound, that they just tried to work the system. And the system is being typically when a team wins a Stanley Cup, they have superstars, right? They have game changers. They have players who can take over a game, whether it's the Kucherov, whether it's your most recent champions, the Florida Panthers, a Kachuk, a Bennett, a Bobrovsky, an Ekblad, a Marchand. Like these are superstar guys. And I know Bennett might not be your typical superstar, but the Florida Panthers are superstar laden. It's considering the fact that Sasha Barkov isn't even mentioned in that conversation, and he's an incredible player. And the Carolina Hurricanes have tried to, in my opinion, and I'll get to my end finish thoughts at the end of this podcast was, oh, they've always tried to skirt this. They've always tried to bend the contrarian. Like, oh, we will do this as a team. We'll build our roster from the inside. We're going to do hometown, homegrown talent. And then when they get too expensive, we're going to ship them off. Justin Falks of the world, those high-end defensemen who we couldn't keep because we're a defenseman, the Jake Gardners of the world. They get to the all-star level, we don't want to pay them. And I want to say I was wrong. Delightfully wrong. When I was trying to work through this podcast, you have a idea of a route forward of how you think, your perception. And then I started doing some research and I started digging into it a little bit. And lo and behold, I was completely off for this Carolina Hurricanes. But let's just jump right into it because I wanted to start with the Rod Brind'Amour era because I know they won the Cup about 12, 15 years ago, but I didn't want to include that because the Rod Brind'Amour era, the Tulsky era, it's kind of a new franchise now. And Rod took over 7 years ago, and they've been very, very good. This team has the second most wins in the NHL over his tenure, 325. Tied with Colorado behind the Tampa Bay Lightning. In that time, 18-19, they didn't have any cap space. They were completely, second most cap space in the league in 18-19. They were up and coming. Sebastian Aho was a rookie. They made the playoffs. They made the conference finals last year, and they lost to the Boston Bruins 4-0. Sebastian Aho had his coming out party, 83 points in 82 games. But they were still growing. They still weren't a good team. 19-20, lost to the Bruins in the first round. Aho, best player. 15th in goals, though. 9th in goals against. So they still were a defensive-minded first team who struggled scoring goals. 2021, same thing. They lose 4-1 in the second round to the Lightning. So you see a trend. They have good regular seasons. They go to the playoffs. They win in the first round, which you should if you're a good team. And then when you get to that creme de la creme, the second, third round, you can't compete against these good teams. The Lightning with Kucherov. That's when they were winning their Stanley Cups and Hedman and Point. The Bruins, when they were just juggernauts, winning President's Trophies, competing for Stanley Cups with Bergeron and Marchand and Krejci and Char and all these guys. 21-22, again, they lose in the second round. They were the favorite. They lose to the New York Rangers with Panarin, with Shesterkin, with Fox, with all these stars. 22-23, they lose in the conference finals again 4-0 to the Florida Panthers. They went to the Stanley Cup finals that year, the Florida Panthers. Again, 15th in goals for, but they were second in goals against. And that's when Martin Nietzsche started to come on. He had 71 points in 82 games. So they were building this young group of really, really high-end talent. Martin Nietzsche, you had Sebastian Aho, Seth Jarvis was starting to come on. Svechnikov was, kind of the unknown at that time. 23-24. You lose 4-2 in the second round to the Rangers again. So you're seeing a trend here. You have a great regular season. You knock it out of the park, and then you get to the playoffs, and it's just everything kind of tanks. And it's like, why is this happening? And then last year, obviously, in my opinion, they skate to the conference finals because they just have an easy game first round with the New Jersey Devils, who were icing a very, very just depleted roster. No Hughes, no Hamilton, and they skate through that first round. Then they play the Washington Capitals in the second round, and I always thought the Washington Capitals were paper tigers the whole season. They were winning games they shouldn't have won. They were, winning all these one-goal games, and it looked great for them on paper. But when you dug into the team, it was like, there's a lot of holes here. And the Carolina Hurricanes exposed them, so they got to the conference finals. Those are the teams they had to beat, but they get to the conference finals, and they finally win a game in the conference finals, but they lose 4-1 for the eventual Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. And last year, again, great defense, 10th in goals against. The first time, I think, in 15 years that they had a better goals for than goals against. They were 9th in goals for and 10th in goals against. So you started to see a shift in mentality from this team, maybe a little bit, maybe pulling away from Rod the Bod's idea of the perfect team, which was a team that was molded after how he was as a player. Hard work, disciplined, obedient, played the game the right way. You went from defense to offense. You never sacrificed your own end to make a play. You started from the back end out. And you started to see maybe Tulski and the organization shifting in the sense that we want to be a little more dynamic. We want to play a little more on our toes. We want to be aggressive. And this team was aggressive last year. They shot the puck like crazy. They were super aggressive. Their defensemen were always in the rush. They were pinching. They were built for that speed game that their roster has been transformed into. And you could tell it was a great season for them. They didn't obviously beat the Panthers, but they didn't get worked and they didn't look out of place. But they also didn't look like Stanley Cup contenders. And my knock on the Carolina Hurricanes over the years has been, and I think everybody can agree with this, if over the last 7 years, from 18 to 19 to now, you have the second most wins in the NHL over that tenure, and you're tied with Colorado and you're behind Tampa. What do those teams have that you don't? Stanley Cups. And Vegas is in the mix, and the Bruins are in the mix, and all these other high-end teams. The Leafs are in the mix, but that's very, very similar. I'll touch on that in a little bit, but you don't have that Stanley Cup. And this is where my hypothesis was just full on. This team doesn't have a superstar. They never go all in, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason why they're losing the playoffs, because they don't have that will to win. They're happy being a small market team who's good in the regular season, and they flame out in the playoffs because they go up against teams with superstars who perform when the lights are the brightest. When there's pressure, those guys step up. When you're going to play the Panthers in the conference finals, where's Aho? Where's Jarvis? Where's Svechnikov? They're nowhere to be found. But then you look at the point totals and you look at the game and the box scores and you go back, you're like, Aho's pretty good in the playoffs. Jarvis is pretty good. And you go, why are they losing? Why are they losing these games? It's like, well, in all honesty, the Panthers are better. The Rangers were better. The Bruins were better. The Lightning were better. Well, why are those teams better? And I've always said this throughout my 5 years and even playing in the league. The Hurricanes don't have guys that scare you. When we would go into Carolina, and I played against all these guys, when we would go into that rink, you weren't scared of any one player. You didn't game plan for Sebastian Aho. You didn't game plan for Jordan Staal. You just game planned against the team. You knew their tendencies and you knew their systems because every single line did the same thing. And you go into that rink and you say, okay, well, they're going to do a 1-3-1, or they're going to do a 2-1-2, or they're going to do a left wing lock, or all of these systems that you have, and this is how you beat it. And this is how you beat this team. They're going to look for turnovers. They're going to pressure this defenseman. They're going to try to do this, that, and the other thing. And it was the same across 4 lines. And that's what makes Carolina great in the regular season, because you can't game plan against a team very well in the regular season. You have maybe a couple hours to go over their systems, and you go, okay, I'm going to do my best. But then you revert back to what you learned in practice, and sometimes you forget, and things happen. Chaos ensues. That's why their regular season record is so good, because they're just so consistent. Every single line, you can interchange guys. Whereas other teams, the first line's different from the fourth line. There's no concrete systems. The coaches let the players play a little more. When I was in Chicago, we had a rough system of forecheck, but it wasn't set in stone. There was guys who can just do things that I couldn't do. There was players that didn't work well in a system, whether that's a Patrick Sharp, who when he gets the puck, he just wants to run and gun. Or if it's a Patrick Kane and he gets the puck and he wants to slow it down, he wants to wind it up. He wants to get some speed and dangle through everybody. Or it's a Marian Hossa who's just an incredible back checker and who's picking pucks off. And instead of waiting to regroup, he wants to get going again and get going up the ice. So there was no set system like there was in Carolina. And that works in the regular season. But when you get to the playoffs and you got 2, 3, 4 days to game plan against these guys, you can pick it apart and you can find weaknesses and you can beat those teams fairly easily. So I think that was their downfall. But the reason maybe they had to implement those systems was because they didn't have any superstars. They did not have one guy who could be a game changer. They did not have a first line where you looked at and you go, okay, we need to stop that first line. And when you look at the teams that they lost to, those teams had that first line. Those teams had those guys where you go, shoot, we need to watch out for Panarin. And I don't know, Zibanejad maybe didn't step up. We need to watch out for Zibanejad. We got to watch out for Stamkos and Kucherov. We need to watch out for Bergeron and Marchand and Pasternak. And correct me if I'm wrong, Carolina doesn't have players like that. And this is where it's funny because I obviously watch other shows, I read other things, I'm trying to research for this show. Just the rose-colored glasses of Hurricanes fans when talking about their team, and even guys in Slack, it's like, oh, well, we got Ehlers and now we're just one centerman away. And looking back on these teams, it's like, oh, we got it. We're gonna dominate. And it's like, you don't have that guy. And I'm sorry, Sebastian Aho is not that guy. He's a great talent. And this is where I think people get confused because I'm not talking down to these guys. I'm trying to be honest of where they're at and ranking wise and just where they line up in the NHL. And it's, in my opinion, it's okay to say that. Aho is an incredible player. Seth Jarvis, friend of the show a couple times, incredible player. Svechnikov, incredible player. I don't put them in the top tier of players. I put them, Aho in the second tier of players and those other two guys in the third tier of players. And when I'm trying to win a Stanley Cup, none of those guys scare me at all. I think Sebastian Aho is a good first-line center for a team that doesn't win the Stanley Cup. I think he's a second-line center for a team that is trying to win the Stanley Cup. And maybe I'm wrong, but he's been there 7-8 years now. They have not made the Stanley Cup finals. They made the conference finals 3 times, and they won 1 game. So you tell me who's wrong. All right, moving on. Why does, a question I want to ask, why does Carolina seem to get a pass? Why? They're in the same Eastern Conference as Toronto and Ottawa and the Rangers. Why does the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Ottawa Senators or the New York Rangers or the Islanders or all these other teams who haven't won Stanley Cups in recent years get criticized? The Hurricanes are the second most wins in the last 7 years. They're constantly at the top of the Eastern Conference. But when the rubber meets the road and the season ends, why is it that Toronto just gets flamethrowers thrown at it? And Ottawa, everybody's picking apart this roster saying it's not going to work. Get rid of these young guys. And we're included in that. Why is it the Rangers everybody wants to dismantle and go after in pitchforks? And the same can be said for the Edmonton Oilers. To a certain extent, they've obviously made the Stanley Cup Finals 2 years in a row. So maybe they're exempt from this because they have shown success. But those teams, Toronto, Ottawa, Rangers, they get killed and crucified. Not a lot of hate for Carolina. I don't understand. Is that because they're in the small market? They don't get the press that other teams do? I don't know. But is Brind'Amour getting a pass? Is Tulsky getting a pass? That's a question for you Hurricanes fans because I don't know the answer to that. Because for where they've been in the NHL for the last decade, they should be criticized more. Shanahan was raked through the coals, and Kyle Dubas was just hammered every time he made a decision or did a press conference. Chris Drury, he's just, every deal he makes is just meticulously gone through. And the Ottawa Senators, they're not as bad as the Toronto Maple Leafs, but they're close. Everything is analyzed. And I know it's because they're in Canada and New York Rangers are original 6 team, but maybe we should criticize Rod Brind'Amour a little bit. Maybe he's getting the Yzerplan treatment a little bit with the Carolina Hurricanes. Or maybe we're wrong. Maybe they're doing their best. And this is where I had to sit back and, take my Carolina hating hat off and go, why can't they get superstars? this is the team in my eyes. This is my assessment of this team. I was expecting, like I said at the top of the show, to find a team that just trades away their good players when they reached free agency and didn't want to give them a huge deal. This is a team that was scared to spend, and maybe it's a team whose talent peaked, and that's it. Aho, I think Svechnikov, Kotkaniemi, Martinuk, Robinson, Slavin, Walker, even Chatfield, all those guys. I think they're stuck in a place now where they're too good to fail, but they're not good enough to win a Stanley Cup. And this is a dangerous place to be as a franchise. And you can live here for a long time, especially the way the Carolina Hurricanes have done it when they've drafted incredibly well. When you look at the players they have drafted throughout the years, it's very, very solid. The players they deal in and out of this system is high. They traded Adam Fox to the New York Rangers for Pete's sake. So this team is a breeding ground for good players. So they have good people in place, good scouts. They have good people to develop these players. So why isn't this team winning? And I think one reason is the goaltending. When you look at this team in the playoffs, typically their goaltenders struggle. Typically they always interchange goaltenders. They don't have that one guy. And over the last 7 years, they've thrown out Peter Mrazek. They've had James Reimer, Alex Nedeljkovic. They had Antti Ranta. They have Kochetkov. And then obviously Freddie Anderson. And I might be missing a couple. That's 7 goalies in 7 years for a team that is one of the best teams in the NHL. That's not okay. And when you look at teams that fail, the common thread is maybe having a great goaltender is key. I've always said build from the middle and on the back end. But you can say the same for the Toronto Maple Leafs over the last 6-7 years. They've had just a revolving door of goaltenders. You can say the same for the Edmonton Oilers and the Ottawa Senators. Rangers, not so much. But the goaltenders have failed these guys in the playoffs. And another thing I thought, I'm wrong now. I always thought these guys were, they sat on their hands, the Hurricanes. Oh, we don't want to trade for big guys. We want to keep our draft picks. We want to just, build for next year. We don't want to mortgage our future. That's not the case for the Carolina Hurricanes. They've been aggressive. They've gone out. They traded for Dougie Hamilton. That was a big one, getting him from Calgary. And then the return for Dougie Hamilton was Noah Hanifin and Elias Lindholm. 2 stars in the making. But Dougie Hamilton at that time was arguably one of the top 5 defensemen in the league. Young, big, and he still is very good, but obviously injuries have thwarted his once promising career. But yeah, you get Dougie Hamilton. You go out and you get Nito Niederreiter. You get Forsling and Forsberg, and Eric Hollow is a good haul. Brady Shea, Trocheck, and Max Domi, Brent Burns, to a lesser extent, Jesse Pulviari, Gostisbehere from the Coyotes, Kashe, when he was a pretty consistent goal scorer, Lyubushkin. And then the big ones, Jake Gensel, 2 years ago. You get him from the Pittsburgh Penguins. That was a big get for this team. Then they add Kuznetsov that same deadline from the Washington Capitals. That year was, I think, the year when I saw this team change. They got Burns in the offseason. Then you go and get Gensel and Kuznetsov. And that was a franchise shift from, making aggressive moves, but still not mortgaging your future, to the ownership and all the high-end staff and Tulsky saying, no, we need to go. We need to get some high-end players in here. And they went and did it. You get Gensel and Kuznetsov and Burns. Didn't work. The very next year, what do? You do it again. You go and you get Taylor Hall. You get Mikko Rantanen. Obviously didn't work, but you trade him for Stankoven. And you try to get these players through the trade. And now you draft well. You develop well. You make great trades. What's the piece that doesn't make sense for this team? And I think this is a piece that's out of their control, but might be changing based on this offseason. Retaining players. Name one big player the Carolina Hurricanes have signed in the last 20 years. One high-end free agent, other than this offseason, when they got Nikolai Ehlers. There isn't any. For whatever reason, players don't want to sign in Carolina when it comes to the offseason. July 1st hits, and they avoid Carolina like the plague. It's either Carolina doesn't want to give out big contracts to free agents, or it's the players don't want to go there. And based on the last two high-end guys that they've had there, Jake Gensel, who they brought in from Pittsburgh, and they tried their best to sign him. They offered him everything, and they couldn't get a deal done, so they traded him to Tampa Bay on June 30th. He had a deal done June 30th that night. We had him on our show. We talked about that whole situation. He just thought Tampa was a better fit for him. He did not want to play in Carolina. And then this season, Mikko Rantanen comes in. This is the guy they need. As soon as he touched down in Carolina, you can tell he didn't want to be there. They started contract talks. They tried to get a long-term deal put in place, 8 years, $9.5 million. He did not want to play there. And so, being a good GM, you have to flip him. Everybody knows the story and send him back to Dallas. And he signs right away. Two high-end players. Consistent 40-goal scorers, both of them. Do not want to play in Carolina. Why? I don't know. I thought Carolina was a great place to play. I liked it. But for whatever reason, players don't want to play there. And if I'm the owner and I'm the GM and the president of the team, I need to figure out why this is the case. Because I can't win unless I'm a destination for free agents. If I have to make up my team consistently through trades in the draft, that's tough to make up a team that way. You need to sign high-end talent in free agency to win in the NHL these days. You have to. It's very hard not to. So the fact that Gensel and Rantanen didn't want to play there, it's very, very scary for me if I'm a Carolina Hurricanes fan or part of the management. Now, have they maybe flipped the script on this? Because coming into this offseason, the best free agent option out there was Nikolai Ehlers. Obviously, Mitch Marner was there. He did a sign and trade before July 1st, and that meant Ehlers was the highest skilled guy in the market. And he took his time, and you have to commend him for this. He took a couple days to figure out what situation works best for him, and he did his due diligence. He spent his whole career in Winnipeg, so he's been a little bit sheltered. What's out there? Living arrangements. How's the rink? How's the training rink? How's the staff? And he picked the Carolina Hurricanes. So is this a sign of things to come? Because players probably would want to play with Nikolai Ehlers. He's a hell of a player. I've loved him day one since he's come to the NHL. I think he's terrific. I don't know, but it's good. It's an interesting stat. Somebody on Slack put this on. Ehlers' contract is $31 million more dollars than the next highest contract that they signed in free agency. That just shows you how they don't sign people in free agency. The next highest contract given out was Ron Francis for $20 million in 1998. That's it. They have not signed anybody since 1998, you guys. It's almost 30 years ago for over $20 million in free agency. You had Calvin DeHaan in 2018 for $18 million. Sean Walker last year, he made $18 million for 5 years. Orlov, his AAV was higher, but he only gave him $15 million for 2 years. That's striking to me that guys won't commit long term to a high dollar deal for this team. I don't know, but maybe getting Nikolai Ehlers is a start of something. And I've always preached, always preached, what are we in this for? What are we doing this for? It's to win a Stanley Cup. And I'm gonna eat some crow here. I've always thought the Hurricanes have done the bare minimum. They're not trying, but they have. They're just doing it in their way. They're not overextending contracts for the guys they have. They let people walk, which is fine. They're active in the trade market. They have a great coaching staff, and I do believe they've offered contracts. Players just seem to go out elsewhere. But until this team can figure out their goaltending and get guys to buy into this organization, I don't see them winning a Stanley Cup anytime soon. But the great thing is they have a good framework of players. They have good young talent that they've grown and are really, really good. But only time will tell. But you can't fault them for not trying, because they are. And you got to give them credit for that. And I stand corrected for the Carolina Hurricanes. So please, if I'm wrong on anything, let me know. I want to know. But all right, let's do some quick hits, and then we'll get out of here. I had another comment saying, keep it a little shorter. I think the last episode went like 48 minutes. So I'm going to try to keep it a little shorter these days. But I don't know. Sometimes I get talking. All right, quick hits. The NHL has signed a new CBA with the NHLPA to the 29-30 season. I think I'm going to dig into that one. I was on the negotiation committee when I played in the NHL, and it's a fascinating thing to be in those talks. I was part of I was a part of one lockouts in 2014, I want to say, where we split the season in half. I think we played 60 games, I want to say, maybe less. But the negotiations that go on between Bettman and the NHLPA, it's pretty intense. So it's good that they got this done early. It's good that they kicked the can down to 29-30. I want to see the ins and outs of this, but the big ones are the whole LTIR thing is off the table. The team you ice in the playoffs has to be cap compliant. You're playing now 84 regular season games, which means more money for the owners, more HRR for the players. So that's a good thing. I don't know the rest of the details, but that'll be interesting to dig into. I'll save that for another episode. The Oilers made a big play. They have brought in a goaltender. No, they haven't. They fired their goalie coach, Dustin Schwartz, who's been there for over a decade. Like, who cares? Who cares? Connor McDavid, if I'm him, and they roll back Skinner and Picard again, I'm not re-signing. You can't expect me to re-sign with this organization if you roll back the same goaltenders again after 3 straight years of just futility in the playoffs. This cannot happen. So reports have been swirling while Ilya Sorokin and Stan Bowman's kicking the tires there. They already missed out on John Gibson, and they haven't done anything to bring in a vet because there's really nothing there. The cupboard's pretty bare unless you want to go into James Reimer, who I think is a really good goaltender, but he's 37, and I don't think Connor McDavid's going to sign off on that. So the clock is ticking, Stan Bowman. You need to get a goaltender for this guy because that is the major reason why you don't have banners hanging in your rafters. You don't have a good goaltender. You put Bobrovsky on Edmonton, they got two banners hanging in the rafters now. The guy's got 2 rings on his finger. So that's frustrating if I'm Connor McDavid. All right, Mike Matheson, per Frank Saravalli, is currently on the trade market. They're having a hard time in Montreal re-signing this guy. They just brought in Noah Dobson, so maybe ice time isn't as there for Mike Matheson. So maybe he's on the move. He's a good defenseman. So kick the tires on him. And finally, last but not least, the Yzer plan is in full effect. The Red Wings and Pittsburgh Penguins are currently in talks, supposedly, for a swap of Erik Karlsson to the Detroit Red Wings. Now that, I would love that. I think we all know how much I love Detroit and my affinity for the Yzer plan and how well it's working. If he gets Erik Karlsson and he gets all of his salary, we have to throw an insurrection a la January 6th, and we have to get him out of office. There's no way that he can continue to be a GM in this league if that happens, because that'd be incredible. It would be absolutely incredible if he trades for Erik Karlsson. I said it first when the San Jose Sharks got a first rounder for him and sent him to Pittsburgh and didn't retain any salary. I said that was a terrible trade by Pittsburgh. And any team that was trying to get Karlsson from the San Jose Sharks should ask for a first rounder and Erik Karlsson, because you're taking on his contract and this terrible player for the next 5-6 years. I was right. Mike Grier is a genius. He should win GM of the year pretty much every single year since he's become into the league. He's done a great job. Just because his team's not successful doesn't mean he's not doing great GM work. But Jim Nill gets it always and forever. I don't know, Bill Zito, he's doing pretty good in Florida. I don't know why he hasn't won. But anyways, if this trade happens, I'm going to be so happy. It might be just a show where I'm just sitting there sipping good whiskey and just saying, told you so. This guy sucks. But until that time, we can only hope. And I can only hope you guys stick with me. Thank you for listening to the show. I appreciate it. Check me out on YouTube, all the other crap that people say, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. Reach out to me. If not, I will talk to you later this week. Hopefully we can get Connor Clifton in here and do a nice interview. And we'll see you guys then. Cheers, everybody.